Hey guys, what's up? Jet Black here, pro glamour photographer out of Tampa, Florida. Welcoming you back to howtoshootmodels.com. What I want to talk about now is something that's a little bit controversial out there, but I think if you watch this to the end, you may not think that I'm crazy. What we're going to talk about is what is the best time of day to shoot. If I were to pull 100 professional photographers and ask them by a show of hands what they thought the best time of day to shoot would be, well, what are my options first? Early morning, high noon, golden hour. So, first group, early morning. I probably get 30, 40, 45 people out of the 100 raising their hand for early morning shoots. High noon, maybe 1 or 2 people. Golden hour, probably the rest of the people. Well, what are my thoughts on different times of day to shoot? Personally, I like high noon, and that probably sounds crazy, but if you understand how to work with light, you may start agreeing with me by the time this video is done. Let's talk about our 3 different options. We have early morning. What's the problem with early morning? Well, number 1, I hate getting up early, so that's a problem right off the bat. Number 2, my models are inherently late. I'm sorry, models, it's just a fact. So, the problem with shooting early morning is you've got such a small window of perfect light that, you tell your model, okay, we're going to be there at 6 o'clock, we've got to start shooting at 6:10, and we've got to be done at 6:35 to get that perfect light. Well, with your models being late, you're trying to get out to the location, this, that, and the other thing. If you miss that window, now you've had a crappy night's sleep, your day's shot. So I would be careful with those early morning shoots, just because there's too many external elements that wind up popping their rear and their ugly heads that wind up making the shoot not come off. If the shoot does come off, everything's perfect. The problem with morning light, although it's incredibly soft, it's wonderful light. I'm not going to argue and debate that. It's absolutely perfect light, but it's cold light. It's not real warm, not like you would have, shooting in the golden hour. So the skin tones are going to be a little bit cold. So I'm not a big fan of the morning stuff at all. So what's our alternative? Well, if we're listening to the masses, we're going to say, okay, the golden hour. The golden hour is fantastic. There's no doubt about that. The problem that I have with the golden hour is I live in Tampa, Florida. I like to do a lot of shooting down on the Gulf. And when I go to the Gulf, if I have my model sitting in the sand with the, Gulf to her back, I've got this huge orange ball of sun up here. Well, what I need to do to pull out the shot is I need to bring the light from my model within 3 f-stops of what my background is. And how do I do this? Well, I'm going to have to do it with either a reflector or, a battery-packed strobe system. And that's a little bit of a pain in the ass because now we've got equipment involved, in the shoot. The other option would be high noon. And if you recall, we only had 1 or 2 people agreeing with shooting at high noon. The theory is, you would read, in any photography book out there, stay away from high noon. It's absolutely the worst time to shoot. And the theory with that is, it's just like when you were a little kid at Halloween. If you held the flashlight like this up to your chin, you got this real gory looking face with all these shadows. Same theory with the sun. If the sun's shooting straight down on my subject, I'm cascading all these horrific shadows all over my subject. That's true. Not going to debate that. However, what I do and why I love to shoot high noon, I'll do it every single day. In fact, I schedule shoots at high noon when I know it's going to be a bright sunny day. Got a lot of those in Florida. What I'll do is I will run for shade. So at high noon, I'll take my subject out and I'll run for shade. Now, what shade am I looking for? I'm looking for shade that's going to just completely encompass my model. a good example, without getting into any photos or anything here, is if I had, let's say I had a building here and it had an overhanging roof like this. Well, my sun's coming straight down, but underneath here I've got beautiful, beautiful soft light. This is incredible light to work with. So this overhang has created a natural scrim for me. And the light underneath this is fantastic to work with. Now, the trick to working with this type of light, or in the shade, is, okay, my building's here, this is my overhang here. So from here to here, I can have my model standing in this section. Now the trick is, I'm gonna bring my model as close to the edge as I possibly can while keeping her in the shade. Now what's happening with my sun? My sun's coming down like this. I'm getting my shade here, but I'm still getting sun that's coming straight to the ground right here. Let's say we've got a concrete, pathway or walkway or, I don't know, parking lot or something like that. Well, what's interesting about this is these sun rays that are coming down are actually bouncing off the surface, bouncing back up onto my model, which has given me, a man-made reflector. I'm going to get some nice catch lights in the eye. I'm getting some fill light in on the picture. And this is just a fantastic way to shoot. It's an easy way to shoot because, I generally can pull it off without having people out there with reflectors or any fill flash whatsoever. But what I've got to caution you when using this technique is the camera has what's called a dynamic range, where, well, let me start by saying our eyes. If I were down at the beach shooting and I had this big giant orange ball back here and I had my subject up here, my eyes can figure this out where I can properly expose for my model and I can properly expose back here for this big orange ball of sun. Don't have a problem doing that. Us as humans, we don't have a problem doing that. The camera, however, has a dynamic range. And a good example of a dynamic range is, let's say you had your girlfriend, you were at your house, you've got a sliding glass door, you open the sliding glass door and she's standing and doing some sexy pose, and you go to take a picture of her. One of two things can potentially happen. One, you're going to have this perfectly exposed backdrop and she's going to be just completely black, she's going to be silhouetted. It's because your camera, again, it doesn't fit within that dynamic range. Or alternatively, she's perfectly exposed, but your backdrop is completely blown out. Same thing, it doesn't fit within that range. The range for digital cameras are generally 3 f-stops. So I need to ensure that my subject, which is my foreground, and my background are within 3 f-stops. So using my high noon technique, here's how it won't work. Okay, so I've got something out there. Whatever it is, say it were a bridge, and my girl was standing underneath this bridge. Well, if behind her is wide open, and this is high noon sun beating down back here, we're going to have the same problem that we did with the sliding glass door. So what I look for when I'm shooting this high noon is I run for the shade, but I look for something dark relative to my subject for the background. So if I were out in a field, let's say, and there was just one tree in this field, and it's got these big branches, and it's just cascading this beautiful, shade around the tree, and I have my subject stand underneath the tree, I need to position her in that field where, let's say 300 yards away, there's woods, there's a tree line back there. Well, that's going to be nice and dark back there. So now I can shoot her, still have my background relatively close to what my foreground is, so I've got proper exposure of both foreground and background. So use this technique because it's easy. You don't need any equipment to pull this off. You can get beautiful shots every single time, but just be cognizant of what your backdrop is. If we're using that building with the overhang right here, the wall of that building right here may be dark. If it were red brick or something like that, that's going to be plenty fine to be within that dynamic range. But I implore you to, pay attention to high noon shooting. You can get away with murder out there with very little equipment. You don't need any assistance, and it is fantastic light. So Go ahead, try that technique. Let me know if you got any questions about it. If you're struggling with something about it, send me an email. But otherwise, have fun with it. I think you're going to be very surprised with your results.